uh, big wigs here, so we will call the meeting to order. The Mud 7 Board of Directors. And see anybody from the public to make comments, so we'll move on to item 3, which is consider an act on request for adjustments or relief from charges.
I don't hold
Nothing from me.
Thank you very much. That takes us to the consent agenda.
And I have, Brian Yates is running late. Item number 7, they want to remove from the agenda, pull it. The information they need from the Department of Labor is behind schedule, so we'll have to get to look at this maybe next month.
Strike that from the consent agenda. So, consent agenda is the minutes from last month's meeting, financial reports, tax collector's report, approving of normal attendance for district business. Anybody have questions, comments on any of the consent agenda items?
Yeah, motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. We have a second on the consent agenda. I got a second. Thank you, Don. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Got 3 ayes, and I'm gonna abstain since I wasn't here. Just like that, we're on item 9. Number 9, receive Sandy Center River Authority Woodlands Division report.
It's gonna start, and then I'll pick up a couple of things.
I apologize, I'm looking at the weather, so if it's not clear, just ask. But, so outside the operations report, I don't have anything to add other than, there's a memorandum, page 38 in your packet. Last year, the Woodlands had approximately $370,000 in funds left over. For about 220,000 of that was earmarked for a generator due to delays last year, didn't arrive within the budget year. This is for your consideration this month and for a vote to the trustees next month for the River Authority to retain the excess funds.
And I guess just one other thing to add on that too is the 216 that's stated here on page 38 memo. The additional approximate 150 would be utilized for a woodlands rate study that we're be kicking off here April timeframe.
And it would be a Woodlands SJRA wholesale rate study where they would be able to develop a model where they could predict wholesale water and sewer rates going forward in the future, which would be a big benefit to the MUDs to have that projection. So I think we should.
How do we know that the benefits are gonna be 150 grand? We're gonna spend 150 grand on a study. How do we know? What's that benefit gonna look like?
For us in predicting and projecting our rates as well. I think for budgeting purposes, they can explain that, I guess, the current methodology is they have to recreate a new model every time they run rates, and it's just
Very manual process with our accounting department and some spreadsheets, where this model that would be developed is something that a consultant would be doing for us, but developing and training our internal staff to be able to utilize it. So as requests come up from either HUD directors or being able to run multiple scenarios in an efficient manner, we would be able to do that to kind of project high, low band to say rates under, a lot of the projects we have upcoming. We got some of the big programs on the water side, big programs on the wastewater side. So we feel this rate model is going to be instrumental in helping us communicate better where the rates are going to be.
when you're looking at literally 100 million or more in improvements with selling bonds to fund and finance those. I mean, to me, this would be a very useful tool.
Would it be a one-time, we did the study, here's what we think the budget or pricing water rates are gonna look like, knowing what we know today? Or would it be the kind of thing where after the study, you guys have a tool going forward, a spreadsheet or system going forward where you can continually update it?
The latter, where we would have a model to continue running scenarios.
to do that as Woodlands Division Manager. Remember that, Jeff? We had a 5-year plan presented every year at budget time. And it was prepared by the division. So I heard you say something about wholesale rates. Is this a Woodlands Division rate study or a GRP rate study or a combination?
So there is separate rate studies that we've already been doing and rate models developed on the raw water side for SGRA and the GRP division side.
Right.
So knowing GRP and raw water essentially all come together and trickle down to the woodlands in some way, it's gonna be a complex model specifically for woodland rates, but it is bringing in other pieces, say GRP.
That's not part of the scope of this study. I mean, there's another consultant that works for GRP division
Well,
that does that.
new consultant that we have on board is going to be doing all rate models for yesterday, including the rate. The raw water one is undergoing an update right now. And the GRP one will be done next fiscal year, and they're going to be starting the Woodland one here. If approved in April, and that's Corollo.
But this particular money being set aside is just Woodlands Division,
Yes.
it's not GRP. That's where I was confused. I think somebody said it was developing.
And if we pay for the study and Conroe and Meg Drum and Quad Vest,
Okay, I'm thinking wholesale as the wholesale
Rates,
the water rate.
the rates they charge the MUDs.
Okay.
For water and.
I'm clear. Thank you.
fund the study, and we still have people that aren't paying their contracted rate to the SJRA. Could we sit here and pay for a study and still have it not matter because we're making up for somebody else's shortfall?
I think that comes into how you could be able to run multiple scenarios to where, there would be an aspect of the model to account for assumptions on no pays or short pays. And that would help build that kind of band of where rates could go. So it is a mechanism of plan for the model to take that into consideration.
So what's the timing of this study? For use, not this current budget year, but next, or what?
It's not, not this current budget year, not FY 24 or 25 is my understanding.
For
For the rate model.
Well, it would
24 is being developed now.
Yes, for predicting future rates, but the study would start in fiscal year 23. We plan to go to March board with it, so it would start in April. I want to say it's like 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
They'd be basically starting from
Next.
scratch.
24. Okay, not this year, but next.
Yeah,
It wouldn't help us in predicting or projecting this year.
correct. So the plan would be to utilize the new model for fiscal year 25 budgeting.
Okay.
So looks like this is gonna get voted on at the trustee meeting next month. Do you guys have input?
Now, are you? This was one of my concerns with the Woodlands budget this past year, was that there used to be a 5-year plan which looked at future rates and stuff, and I didn't see anything like that in last year's budget. Is there gonna be some effort this year to do something like that?
I can't speak to if we have projections going out with the rate study starting. And that's our hope. Once the rate study is compared, it's almost like a 10-year look ahead.
Yes.
Before we have to really touch it again.
We've done little bits and pieces, and sitting in the waste.
I'll give you my old model. You can use it.
Were you always correct? I mean,
Within 10%.
I'll let him do it if he's been doing it for a long
Within
time.
10%. I mean, I did that for like 15 years.
Yeah, I understand.
You
You're
know?
talking- Okay.
No, just,
So you're talking 220,000 would be for the generator and then 150 for the rate study.
Yes.
If that's
Is that a
deal or
yes
not.
or a no?
It's like a lot of money to me, but
Studies.
You know, I think,
Well, and I think y'all have done a pretty good job of requesting qualifications and weeding down the consultant that's capable of doing this. They're doing it for 2 other divisions. So I'm not saying it's a bargain price, but I'm saying in the engineering consulting world, this firm has the capability.
Who is it?
And
I would just encourage you at the trustee meeting next month, just to have a little more ammo to back up why you think these are the right people and this is the right price. I mean, if it is, great. But I don't feel like we have enough information to go, yeah, we're behind you 100% on that 150 grand.
Well, we can do that. So we got, information. Well, first we went out for a request for qualifications and select most qualified consultant for that. So we can bring that, but also we have information on what it has cost to develop the original DRP rate model, what it's cost us to do it on the raw water side. So,
Sounds like good
I know
data
you're gonna have
points.
to take my word for it, but it is in line with what we've done for developing rate models in the past.
I think
So,
any supporting data like that would be helpful for decision makers.
yep, we can do that.
Ready for questions on the rest of it? Okay, 17 and 6, page 6, 17 and 18. So the monthly blend, again, deviated from 50/50. And I know last time you said, well, that was just the annual.
Well,
And
blend was deviated back in December due to high TTHMs in the system. TTHMs are starting to form in the system in December. So what we done, we reduced the amount of surface water in the district. Best to knock TTHMs out. We followed that through till January, where we resampled these locations, and the sampling came back very low, 20 parts per million. So we're working the blend back to the 50/50. And of course, the 50/50 is an annual average.
Right.
Not a monthly average.
so again, feedback. If you have a plan that's deviated from 50/50 by month, if you could show the plan, so we know whether this is a deviation from plan or not. And it sounds like it was a deviation from plan.
Yes.
And if you've got a deviation from plan, if you could just put a note down. Okay. And then page 18 shows that the blend groundwater surface is 50/50 year to date.
Like
And I'm not sure that's
52,
consistent.
48. What I got. I mean, I calculated off of here. I had the same question, 52, 48.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
but that's not what it says on the,
Yeah, and I was wondering if that just is missing a month's worth of data.
It's missing some data, yes, sir.
okay, so it shouldn't read year to date then. I mean, the two pages ought to be consistent.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you, Brad. Same question.
okay. Page 25, and I know these sounds like nits, but they're important to messaging. Operating revenues and operating expenses, percent variance. Those both show as positive numbers. But one actual is higher than budget and one's actual is lower than budget. So, I mean, it sounds like one's a minus, one's a plus.
Yes, sir.
Because it looks like they're moving in parallel, like one moved up 12%, one moved up 13%. Wow, they're close. Variation makes sense. But in reality, revenues went up a lot and expenses went down.
So it should be a negative.
Which is
variance.
good.
Which is good. Yeah, I'm not complaining about the number.
Yeah.
But when I just looked at it, it was like,
It should like it be a negative variance.
yeah, should do negative.
We'll take a look at that.
Okay. And I guess the compliment is, I guess the month's budget operating funds up to 9. That's an increase, right? You think that's good, right?
Yes.
That's what we want. So,
On page 18, where you have the rolling 12-month water loss, this was kind of highlighted at the trustee meeting last week. Can you kind of talk about how the 2% and 4% unaccounted for in total loss compared to pre-automatic metering?
Yeah, so before, I guess, the AMR, I want to say we were anywhere between 7 and 9%. I mean, on the water loss over this last year, we've seen that tighten up a lot with the installation of new meters.
So the new meters are contributing to greater efficiency and greater revenues.
Accuracy.
Accuracy, yeah.
Plus, since all the meters were installed in a short period of time, all these meter leaks and things that normally would go on that aren't metered, that's been tightened up. Okay, did you have Jim, were you gonna speak on the water loss?
Yeah, Kyle, there's a
There's a page.
chart table on page 34 that I think helps show that trend in terms of the rolling 12-month average percent unaccounted for water. And that,
A lot of difference.
a lot of it is distributed to the MI being implemented over time.
I think that's a positive worth highlighting. Any other questions for our SJRA reps?
So something else, just wanted to point out too, there's a copy of a presentation in here that was presented to the audit committee, starts on page 43. With some budget assumptions, really where I wanted to jump to was page 51. Where it's outlining kind of a funding roadmap of how we put projects on hold for the wastewater strategic planning piece and how we kind of, we're gonna shift some of these funds around. The first one is regarding future facilities. There's currently a balance in there of a little under $4.6 million. There was an approved project, a portion of wastewater treatment facility 1 aeration basins, a little over $2 million. That project, based on the wastewater strategic plan, is not needed anymore with the recommendation of building a new treatment facility. So what we're requesting is to utilize the $4.6 million of the balance in that future facilities for partially funding a elevated storage tank number 6 project. And the additional funds would come out of our. Furthermore, on page 52, this is referring to the R&R funds. Currently, there is a project in there for lift station number 5 force main. Again, with the wastewater strategic plan coming in and the conveyance aspect of going to a deeper all gravity conveyance line in that area. There's no longer a current need for the lift station 5 force main project, a little over $5.2 million. We also are in final design for the town center water line replacement. A portion of that is out of R&R, $4.9 million. That project is closer to like a $10 million construction project now. So we plan to move that to bond funding for the AC water line program. So in combination there, the proposal is to take that approximate $10 million from those 2 projects and switch it over to R&R funded land acquisition for treatment facility 1 property. Then also further down the line, we're going to be looking at what we would need for wastewater conveyance line to replace that lift station 5 force main. So we're estimating around $5 million for each one of those at this point. And then the last one I want to touch on is page. Go ahead.
So on page 52,
Yeah.
the slides are cut off here. So is wastewater conveyance, is it land?
That's land acquisition, yes, sir.
Okay, so land is not on the slide.
Yes, and we'd rather fund the land acquisition pieces out of simply cash rather than, a water development board.
Is that normal? Use on our funds for, when we think land and the capital acquisition?
So is it just buying easements or right of way or actual land?
So for the plant, we would be buying, acquiring land and fee.
Mm-hmm.
For the wastewater conveyance, we would be looking at both, but at a minimum, we would need easement,
Mm-hmm.
depending on what the routing comes.
It doesn't sound like R&R I mean, if we were doing just R&R, we wouldn't need the land for treatment plant one.
It's
Well-
it's replacing wastewater treatment plant number one, really, is what that would be. And you'd have to buy some land to do that. Question is, even with eminent domain, if you had to use that, would you still have to spend $5 million for that land next to a sewage treatment plant?
Right now, that's the best estimates we have based on appraised value, looking at kind of the soft costs for legal associated with it. And yeah, I'd love for it to come in less,
For
but
lack of better information.
you know, at this point in time, we have not a whole lot of information to see where.
Do we know,
Whatever.
is the land platted yet, any of it?
There's
We,
buildings on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about the other, any vacant land that platted. I mean, that makes a lot of difference in the cost. If you just have a pasture, you can claim it was worth a whole lot more than it is. If it's not platted, then you're not really prepared to build those things. It's all about the money. But 5 million in the woodlands.
page 53, the slide there is just our proposed use of the remaining 2017 bond funds. So currently we have almost 25 million remaining. We plan to utilize 500,000 for that, for the wastewater strategic plan phase 2 associated with the plant. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. South Shore Gravity Main, that's a project that's been on hold to see if that would be impacted or changed in any way by the strategic plan. Now that we've completed the strategic plan, that project is not to be impacted, and we plan to move forward with final design and construction of that, looking at $12 million there. The conveyance design, that would cover preliminary and final design for the new gravity conveyance, estimated about 4 million. And then we would use the remaining 8.3 million to work through preliminary final design for the treatment facility. So that's our current proposed use of the remaining bond fund.
This is information only, or are you asking for endorsement or?
And this is just information only at this point.
I would like you to take the question. I mean, R&R is renewal and replacement, and it just seems like using R&R funds to purchase land seems inappropriate to me.
What would you do if you needed a pump station?
Well, with a replacing pump station, you already have it.
Not replace, build a new one
Well,
because,
that's not R&R.
what is it?
It's
It's the same
expansion.
thing. You're saying you'd have to use another fund to get the land to build a pump on.
Well, if the new pump station is not replacing an existing one, it's not R&R. Renewal and
Even if the
replacement.
old pump is gone and dilapidated and no longer functional.
Well, then you're replacing on a service equipment.
Can you not use bond funds for land? I mean, it would make sense if you could to switch page 52 with a line on page 53 of South Shore Gravity Main Rehab, which is our.
Did that make?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not an accountant, okay? I'm not a lawyer, so you guys do whatever you think is best. Just in the world I come from, there's pretty clear lines on different types of money. Maintenance money is different than capital money. Okay, I appreciate it.
That kind of makes both over the bond funds, it did preferably paying out of cash in some way for the actual acquisition plan, usually what we do. Utilizing bond funds, depends on what source of those bond funds are. There might be additional stipulations and requirements that we would have to go through, possibly pay more money for to get. the documentation you need to put our land under those bonds. I think that's other things to take into consideration.
That's a good point. You might have rules associated with that particular bond issue that don't allow you to buy land. I don't know. That's where you need the lawyers or the
Yeah,
advisors to.
somebody's gonna speak up before it's spent.
Mhm.
The 2017 bonds. Those are Woodlands bonds, right? I don't know what funds those.
Water, state revolving fund. All right, and we got, also have the DBE goals and requirements attached to them also. So that becomes very difficult on the land acquisition side.
Anything else?
I had a question, I'm somewhere in the packet, can't tell you exactly where, a list of projects, and one of them was rehab of gravity sanitary sewers. It said it was, I assume it's on hold because it said it's gonna start again. Was there a reason it was not being done?
That may be the South Shore project, I would say, which has been on hold for basically a year now.
That's what I was, just
That would be the one getting kicked off. Yeah.
and most of that rehab, what, is there any major kind of rehab we're doing? Slip lining or?
That would be, kind of the CIPP slip lining through it. It consists of, I think, 30-inch up to 48-inch.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you about the size.
$10 million construction. So that's up at the south end of Lake Woodlands, where Woodlands Parkway is, crosses there, up into kind of the cove area.
Okay. Thank you.
So continuing on, we got a lot this month. So you do have a action item on your agenda, item number 10 regarding considering act on giving your trustee direction on how to vote. Strategic plan. Did want to bring your attention to page 36 in your packet, which is a one-page summary of what the stakeholder recommendations are tied to that agenda item number 10. Very high level. The first bullet point is moving forward with a phase 2 on the plant side to further optimize, right size the capacity, further refine the cost estimate, look at preliminary layouts associated with that alternative 9, building a new wastewater facility adjacent to plant 1 with utilizing the MBR technology. Second bullet point, like we talked about, is the land acquisition piece of it. Associated with the plant. Item number 3 is starting the commencement of preliminary engineering for that conveyance gravity line down to the new plant and removal of up to 5 lift stations. So down at the bottom half is just more a little flow chart. How this is, kind of 3 different pieces that spawned from the strategic plan. Strategic plan looked at planning horizon, level of service, numerous alternatives. We landed on a treatment technology. Moving forward, like I mentioned, it's really the optimizing in phase 2, which would be under $500,000, approximately 6 months for the consultant to complete that. So we would be looking at kicking that off probably mid-April. And approximately 6 months from April, have results from that phase 2. Preliminary design, we would be going out with a new request for qualifications to get a consultant on board or a consultant team. Start looking at that route analysis. Is there fatal flaws with the concept that was produced out of the strategic plan? Starting survey, geotech, and really defining what land acquisition needs. So I'll entertain any questions you have on that summary, but that's really what we're looking for as an action item.
So alternative 9 is what the committee recommended. And so what other alternatives will the trustees be voting on next month besides alternative 9?
So it's solely alternative 9, but also with the recommendations of proceeding with the conveyance and land acquisition.
To approve it or don't approve it, back to the drawing board.
And it wasn't unanimous either.
Land acquisition and stakeholder committee was unanimous. So was the conveyance piece. I think it was 9-2 for the phase 2 alternative 9 from the 11 buds that sit on the stakeholder committee.
And you were pro alternative 9, right? As our committee rep.
Yeah, the two that did not vote for it. Their concern was right sizing the plant. And there was some talk, or
Is there not still room for right sizing as part of all this design and consulting?
That's really what phase 2 is right sizing the capacity.
So let me, because I did I followed up with some of the folks.
okay,
And like, it's more than just capacity. It's also a matter of scaling and staging. Okay. What you're doing now, what's on the table is you do the study, set the capacity, and you build one time. Okay. So you're going to be forced during stage 2 to set the capacity target for the plant. And you're going to have single investment for that whole capacity in the very near future for a capacity estimate that reaches out, 30, 40 years. The alternative, there was an alternative that looked at staging alternative 9,
Layering in capacity over time.
layering capacity, so you can build part with an initial estimate of what capacity is, defer some spending, and right size the total capacity. And I'm very concerned that for this kind of investment, I'm just shocked that we're already zeroing in on a single solution. I think it's way too early. I would like to see more alternatives evaluated, or keep 2 alternatives alive going into the next stage.
Do you have an opinion, Don, on this staging of?
both alternatives were for the same future capacity. One of them utilized half the plant that's there with a half-size new plant, and the other one is a total new plant. So it wasn't exactly phasing for the future. Both alternatives considered a 6 MGD or 7.8 MGD plant, however you want to. The same size plant as what's there now.
But you could, when you got ready to build a second, you could right size it at that point in time.
That's if the existing plant worked. I mean, it's all very old. That was why I did not like the alternate to alternative 9, if that makes sense. It's because it relied too much on dilapidated equipment. I just didn't think it would work.
You gotta keep 2 plants though.
Yeah. What the design team is supposed to do is look at ways of minimizing the cost. If I understand this right, tell me if I'm wrong, but minimizing the cost of the expansion, that you could build more plant building or whatever structure, underground structure are needed, but not put in all the membranes. So there are downsizing options like that keep the plant the same and allow for future, but not have a huge burden on costs for the ratepayers.
Right.
And
When you could still,
when I look at the data that shows we're looking at over $100 a month extra cost to proceed alternative 9, I just can't in good conscience feel like I've got enough data to stand behind this and say, are there other alternatives that can keep this down? If we go to our customers, our folks that elected us and say, hey, be prepared to go initially a $40 a month charge. That's going to ramp up to $100 a month charge for sewer. I think they're going to say, are you sure that's the only thing you can do? And I'm not convinced what's alternative 9 is the only thing we can do.
Both costs, in my mind, both costs were within 3%, something like that. The last two alternatives that were investigated.
So I
They
guess,
were well below the other alternatives.
the other thing that would be nice to know, just to put it in context, would be, okay, if we just say, screw it, we're not gonna do the new plant and we're just gonna fix the old equipment as long as possible, is that $50 a month more, $30 a month more? Because it's gonna be
That was
really
one, that was
expensive.
one of the alternatives.
Right. And it's gonna be really expensive just to do that, right?
Yes, yes.
So is
That's
that
how we
$50?
narrowed it down to alternative 9.
I guess, can I describe a little bit more what phase 2 and the right optimization and right sizing the capacity? A piece of that is, what does the capacity need to be that we would be constructing a plant in 2027? So that's a question. And it's going to differ between, different processes and facilities within the plant, to where portions of it you might be building to an ultimate capacity. So how do we define like an ultimate capacity and build those structures to that? How do we define, all right, here's the current capacity need for 2027. And then, like Don was alluding to, you might build it in a way that you could just add additional membrane facilities to get a higher capacity at some future phase. So I think it is still looking at an alternative 9 that may be phased on the capacity side.
That's not what I gathered from reading documents. Okay.
Which
Correct. Did you look at the final report? I didn't see any of that in there. I saw one line in the draft report that had some similar comment about optimizing the capacity or something like that. It was just too brief for me, for all the discussion we had at the stakeholders meeting.
I mean, to me, it sounds like if we go forward with this, you guys have a green light to go and do what I would call minor optimization around a single solution. And I think it's too early to have a single solution. Okay. And I think the costs that we're looking at are just unfathomable to our community. I mean, I'd like to know, how do our costs compare to some other costs in the area?
Sure.
And we haven't seen any of that data.
Too, and that's something we're formulating a response on. There's a lot of articles out there and documentation on, City of Conroe built this new facility for $59 million. How does that compare to what we're planning here? So that is something that, we acknowledge, and there's been other MUD directors that have made those comments and questions to us. And something that we need to work on a more formal response to justify what we're doing.
I would have liked to have seen the MUD stakeholders, not necessarily me, but MUD stakeholders continue and through the preliminary phase. And I thought the stakeholders had added a lot to this study.
I agree.
And I think that could continue to do that in the preliminary phase and help the consultants in their feedback to the MUDs. Yes, the MUD input is there. If they go off and do this by themselves, without our input.
We proposed that last month, and
Yeah, I
the
know.
response was,
the
we don't need your
response was
input, you'll slow us down.
Immediate cutoff, yes,
Once you give us approval, we're ready to go.
yes. And
That feedback came from where?
Yeah.
Ed,
Yeah,
and the two people that did not vote to approve this, that was a major reason.
One of them doesn't participate in that plan, as you know.
That's true, 386, yeah. But they were a voting
They were.
member. I never quite understood that, but whatever.
Well, because one of the early options was build something over in their land.
I know, but
So,
I know.
so make them invite them at the beginning,
Yeah, I
right?
know, but not as a voting member. There's no harm done there, so, in the end.
So you went through all those meetings, the whole
Yes.
process. Was it a valuable, thorough, appropriate process? Or was it a waste of time?
Can we turn off the camera? No,
Are you saying it needs to just start over?
no, I don't think it needs to start over. I think there needs to be continued input from the MUDs in the next phase.
One of the things I would like to see is I would like to see a summary of deliverables for the next phase, more than just this one-page summary.
Yeah.
And I don't
Let's go, yeah.
see, okay, we're giving you a green light, but we haven't been told what you're going to bring back when you finish spending our money.
Right.
And I-
And that was part of this, as being a stakeholder, that whole scope and all was part of the early on discussion about what to add in the scope and, not do. And so I agree with you.
I just have no experience doing what we call gate reviews for large projects. And this early limiting it to one solution and having limited information about what the deliverables are for the next phase.
There's a bullet point here that says alternative 9 has the greatest perceived value, lowest anticipated life cycle cost, and a relatively similar near-term impact to ratepayers as compared to baseline renewal and replacement of the existing stuff.
Right.
So
I don't disagree with that general statement.
that's a pretty important statement.
Yes, it is.
It's expected to be less than 5 to 10% difference in terms of the average ratepayer's total overall monthly water and sewer bill. So if this thing is going to raise it $100 a month, sounds like it's going to go to $90 a month anyways, with just replacing the old stuff.
I think the costs in the report are very high.
Because of just fudge factors or, extra built in
Yeah, there's the 30% contingency.
contingency.
They're just very, very high. It's over 200 million for the plant. Is that right?
So they're probably high on both.
Yeah. So we spent 200 million on the surface water plant. Look at the complexity of that plant. Granted, it was several years back, and understand that things have changed, but that was a 16-acre site or something. With a lot of underground work. This is a small site. I think it's way high. But that's me. The conveyance, I don't really have a handle on it.
But we don't even have bids yet.
I know.
I mean, we don't even have engineering drawings yet. So
Yeah.
you really don't know what the cost is,
No.
to be
Well,
honest.
you have to benchmark with other activities. I mean, this isn't a one of a kind. It's not like Woodlands is go do something never been done before. There's thousands of these.
It's not the first plant being built either. I mean,
No.
to do estimates now, I mean, you go through a bid process for a reason. And they're not gonna just pay that much because he says it may cost that. So I think it's time for that to shed itself as we go forward. So is there no way I'm trying to understand to stage a second treatment plant? I mean, a lot of times you design, City of Houston had a 200 million gallon plant proposed on Lake Houston. Started off with 40 and how they're going up as we need it. I mean, does this include?
It's so small. I mean, by
Yeah.
comparison.
Right. Well, I mean, but still you stage it. You don't have to build it all at once.
He was just saying that. You
That's
just,
what I'm,
Yeah, it really comes down to what do you want to build for kind of racks in the membranes and the capacity that is a key part of the whole plant.
and so
That could be staged and designed and constructed in a way for it to be, call it easy to add additional modules to that.
And then
Additional.
still leaves time for what you and others have talked about. Whatever
Additional
criteria is being used to project the future demands and all that. That's a pretty good guessing game too, when you consider redevelopment, development, all the things that can decrease per capita usage and all kind of things that happen over those time periods. You have time, they're not gonna, again, set for a number today and assume that that's a permanent, this is how much we're gonna treat. In
Okay.
5 years from now, we're not gonna change our mind. All that happens to me. I think there's time for that. And I guess I don't know the difference between number 9 and what else. I mean, we've already said that's the best deal and we're looking at. And I don't know about, because we mentioned last time that at some point, we don't get to be a part of the process. We don't get to look at the blueprints or the CAD drawing.
No, but
We don't get to go and decide that this is should use aluminum instead of titanium. Those things we gotta let go of. So when is it that we let go?
I still think this next phase is part of the planning
Which is
process.
still planning, and I agree with that too.
When it
more
gets to the
so.
design, I agree with you.
There's something, when you get to design and construction, we're out of it. I mean, that just can't.
I agree, but I think this next phase is a
Planning.
continued planning phase.
Okay, so bottom line is this is gonna come up for a vote
Mhm.
in March. And it's trustee,
By trustees.
and so
Well, you have a clear understanding of what you're to do.
No, not till we.
well said.
I'm just glad I'm not, he's the alternative. I don't have to.
So I feel like the consensus is it's really hard to vote because there's still so much uncertainty here. I mean, I could abstain,
Well,
but
at least express the concerns that have been
Mhm.
expressed here tonight.
I mean,
Is there a way?
you know, I think this has been a really helpful discussion and some of your feedback about we could do this, we could do that, or that might be included. Those are all helpful, but they're not in what's being approved. And, you know, what would make it easier to endorse this is commitment that says, when we go forward, these are the things we're going to do. We're going to look at staging the membranes. We're going to look at, you know, doing this and look at doing this. Okay. And maybe, you know, in your world, that's all implied here, but that's not what you get when you read the documents. And, you know, especially based upon the discussion last month, it was like, we want you guys to approve it. It's a green light and then leave us alone. We'll be back ready 6 months later with the answer. And I find that unacceptable.
I think that could be fixed with continued input during the process.
So it sounds like a couple of things, and I know I kind of hopped into it a little bit late, but I'm kind of gathering around or kind of coalescing what some of these comments are. It sounds like there may be a way to proceed with a recommendation to your trustee to move forward with the stakeholder recommendations with 2 caveats. One being that the phase 2 involves the stakeholder group. And number 2, that the River Authority develops a list of receivables that will result from phase 2. Is that?
Yes.
So we'll have the detailed scope of work for proposed phase 2 by the end of February.
But it's more than just a list of the deliverables. It's what's included in those deliverables. That those deliverables need to clearly define that additional alternatives are going to be looked at from an optimization standpoint. I mean, I still struggle with the cost. And I haven't seen anything from a benchmarking standpoint or a relative comparison of others that helps me be comfortable.
Yeah,
That
I
we
don't
can
think
go-
that, I don't think all those costs were presented in the final drafts, were they? I mean, I didn't read word for word, but I did a healthy skimming through the report. But I don't recall seeing all the alternatives listed and all of the costs shown.
Well, we didn't go down to detailed cost estimates and all the alternatives.
No,
A lot of those
but-
alternatives were thrown out.
Through the process, they were tossed out because they were clearly too expensive or had clear problems. And I don't think that's reflected in the report. I was there during that process. And so I agree with this statement that those two final alternatives, one is tossed out, was slightly less costly on paper, but there's just too many variables in that whole costing process. I always considered them roughly the same cost, and the one that was tossed out made no sense because it was relying on 40-year-old facilities. That just didn't make any sense to me.
Mhm.
So basically you had half the plant, 3 MGD was new and 3 MGD was old.
Right.
And that's where the capacity
Yeah.
phasing thing came in. And so that just doesn't make sense to me. So if they're roughly the same cost, do this one. They both required acquiring the land adjacent to the plant. All those things were still in there. But the other alternatives were just, I wish y'all had just kind of summarized that in the final report.
And I think the copy of the report that was distributed was still missing the conclusions and recommendations.
Yes, yeah.
We are working on
That's the last, it was
finalizing
still a January draft, I think.
that. So that final report will be available in the near future too.
But it wasn't available to us. For
Which would have been
discussion.
good for this vote. Yeah.
Yeah.
To have that additional.
I think if we add that caveats in there, I think, I would.
Did you
vote
write
to-
those down, those caveats?
I know, yeah, I know what the caveats are, but I mean, how do you
Right,
write them in
happy.
such a way, that it's meaningful? Yeah, we want more info we want more specifics on the deliverables, and we want the planning committee to be involved in phase 2. Well, what does
Or
that
a
really
plan,
mean?
if y'all want to do somebody else's, okay with me too. But-
Well, we want some input during phase 2. How do you specify that,
Phrase that.
in
When the
enough
two
detail?
alternatives were on the table, there was alternative 9 and whatever the other one was,
Right,
9A or something, I don't remember what it was.
baseline.
9 and 9, this one was 9, I don't
This
remember.
is 9A1.
But that was part of the talk, was that the stakeholders group would continue through the preliminary phase.
Seems like there ought to be some kind of transitional points along during that phase 2 where you guys can say, okay, we've collected all this information. We've got some decisions to make here. This is what we're thinking. We're gonna bring in these guys that were on that committee again to, give their input before we finalize this decision. It seems like that. There's gotta be something like that that could be done.
So you'd basically be providing the direction to the trustee, it sounds like would be to provide conditional approval of the stakeholder recommendations, subject to the River Authority agreeing to have the stakeholder group involved in phase 2, as well as having a list and backup information associated with various deliverables.
Well, I think you need to be clear that it's not just having a list of deliverables, it's including in the deliverables.
List of good deliverables.
Additionally, yes, yes. And I mean, that ought to be part of the proposal that gets brought to the trustees. I mean, if you wait till
And
March and then you bring
well,
this to the trustees.
maybe the trustee votes gets delayed to April. And there was
I mean,
discussion of that at the stakeholder group as well. If this timeline was still doable or not.
It seemed to me that you asked to be involved in this next phase, that at that meeting that you go to, that would result in a great deal of discussion of how much and how and who. So I mean, at least it be discussed at that meeting. Then you'll see what the other stakeholders think about that.
How many other
What other,
MUDs have
sorry.
had their meeting?
the executive.
We've had 2 earlier today and 1 yesterday.
Are we the only ones being painful here, or did you get similar feedback from the others?
They had discussion, but eventually the vote was unanimous, I think, in each to follow the stakeholder
Right.
recommendation.
Okay, so do we want to go ahead and vote conditional upon a list of deliverables, you know, that are clearly spelled out and the trustees obviously agree to as being one of the conditions, and the second condition being that the SJRA allows for stakeholder committee involvement and input at some level, you know, that everybody can be comfortable with in phase 2. I mean, they obviously they don't want the stakeholders involved in every single
No,
bit of the process, but there ought to be some points along the way, you know, where they can update the stakeholders, say, here's where we are, you know. What do you think?
yes, I don't think it needs to be as detailed as we were last year,
Major milestones.
Yeah.
Along the way.
but just opportunity to,
Stakeholder involvement also is gonna be driven by what the deliverables are.
Right. So I think asking us to endorse without seeing what those additional deliverables are, I'm not ready to endorse. Okay? Because you could say, oh, we'll add some deliverables. Will you approve it? Well, you could add, you know,
Well, I'm just saying, you know, we have a list of deliverables that the trustees all look through and they either agree to or they don't. And so somebody's gonna have to agree to it, but you're right, you wouldn't have the decision in that case. You wouldn't have the foreknowledge of it.
that's why I'm saying maybe April. Yeah, April trustee, at least have another meeting in between.
What are the implications if this MUD doesn't vote or votes no?
Might be in the minority.
I mean, does it have to be unanimous for all the MUDs?
no, there's
No, sir.
No. Yeah, I
I'm
can
wondering,
pretty much
would it
assure you
be
we won't be the only.
Helpful or possible or feasible to maybe for your MUD to schedule a meeting before the trustee meeting and get some information from SJRA that might put you in a position to vote support?
That seems like a reasonable possibility.
Something SJRA.
I think so. As soon as we get to the end of February here, I think we'd have a much more detailed, defined scope of work. You know, like we typically put together for any consultant contract. And if y'all would want that to be kind of walked through separately before trustees, I think that's something we can entertain. Do. So, if that helps.
So the trustee meeting in March is the 8th.
Couldn't be any earlier. Mark,
That'd be a specially called public notice meeting
By the 7th meeting.
of meet, so.
So it would probably need to be the 6th or 7th.
Because there's a
You guys would
vast
need,
majority of all of us are out of town for TWCA meeting in Bastrop, 1st through 3rd.
you know, the other possibility would be do these guys a favor, meet at, 5 o'clock before the trustee meeting on the 8th. And they're already here anyways, and they wouldn't have to make a special trip for our board if we wanted to do that.
Or do a Zoom.
Can't do
Do
Zoom.
Zoom now,
Yeah. That was only during the COVID lifting
state
the
law.
requirements by the governor.
Learn something every day. Okay. 6th and 7th work for me.
What about the 8th?
8th doesn't work. Well, that's not spring break, is it?
That's a problem.
Yes, no. I could do a 4:30 on the 8th, but I can't do a 5. Need to be done by 5:30.
Staff on schedules and, Jim and Eric look on what we do, but acknowledge the request or try to
Thank you.
make it happen.
I think some benchmarking is going to be really, really important. Because the numbers we have are going to be. I mean, I don't know how much of this is public already. I mean, I heard our friend at Lone Star was already talking about we were advertising a $40 a month sewer rate increase. So it won't take long for.
I think what you have is a board that wants to redo the infrastructure responsibly and would feel better about voting for it with more detail. We don't want to be obstructionists. We don't want to be gravel in the gears of progress here. But I think what you're hearing is just, the information that we have is probably not as clear as what we'd like to see. And if it is a public relations, public information campaign that's got to come explain why we're going to raise their rates substantially, more detail would help sell that story. Okay, so then we're gonna table our vote until we get a chance to revisit this in the future.
And we'll try to coordinate it in special meeting. If we get a quorum.
One way or the other, try to get a quorum. And, okay, so we all agree it's important. We want to make the decision. We want to make the vote. We just want to do it as fully informed as possible. So to be continued on item 10.
Two additional things to add for the whole estuary update real quick. I'm not gonna go through it just for the sake of time, but there is a handout here from Teresa Nichols, our consultant that's been working on the wastewater strategic plan. We have had some mud directors questioning the MBR technology. Is there, adequate number of manufacturers out there? How long has it been around? What would be, replace units or something happen, how quickly we could get them, where are these being manufactured, et cetera. So this memo here goes through some of those questions and provide responses. If you want to look at that and provide any questions back to us, let me know. Also on our agenda update, there's an item for Bear Branch Dam. Just real quickly there on there's a valve vault there that we talked about in the past. We are still on schedule for a mid-March receival of the new patch and lid. We're currently working on procuring a contractor to install that once that comes in. So hopefully early April timeframe, we got a new lid on it. We're done.
Okay,
Well, maybe not. I got Spring Creek too, I guess. Let me get to it.
are we good for item 10? 9. So item 11, Spring Creek Detention Study.
Yeah, real quick update. We had a funding partner meeting. That a number of MUD directors attended on January 30th. Our consultant has been working on optimizing the Walnut Creek and Birch Creek reservoirs and relooking at those benefit cost ratios. They've utilized the Corps of Engineers model. Those benefit cost ratios have come back looking advantageous, up around or above a 1. Some action items coming out of that meeting, one being consultant's going to go back and run the Texas Water Development Board model benefit cost analysis, see how those ratios come out in comparison to the Corps of Engineers model. Second action item is starting to develop more of a public outreach program. So where we are going to be looking at doing a second public meeting. The plan is that would take place here in the Woodlands. We've talked about looking at some of the township facilities to host that. That is not had a set date yet, but we're working on developing, who do we want to make sure is notified of that? So getting contacts for village associations, HOAs, other politicians in the area. And been receiving input, developing that. So that's where we're.
That looked like a town hall meeting with hundreds of people. Is that the intent?
We have done one so far out in Waller County. I think we had, I'd say maybe 80 or so people attend. But yeah, it could be 100+ people here in the Woodlands for your town hall, come and go.
About 100 really happy people that I've been to those meetings before, but proposed lakes and detention and stuff.
And it was recommended or suggested an option rather than the Woodlands Township offices. Here, there's a facility over in Creekside that may, what do they call it? I forget. It's the park and the community center over there that may hold 100+ people. I think the San Jacinto Regional Planning Group had a meeting out there.
I think it's that Rob Fleming.
Oh,
Second.
That was suggested. It might work.
All right, let's keep moving. Item 12, consider and act on district customer communication info message.
In your packet is an example of what MUD 47 did back in December, January. And I think I reported last month, we would put it on all the MUD agendas to see if you wanted to do something similar. This was a template that was developed by John Geiger. Some of these items would be applicable in some way to your MUD, some would not, but just if this is something you're interested in doing, other MUDs that have decided to do it have appointed 1 or 2 directors to work with John Geiger to come up with some bullet points that they think are important to bring back to your MUD for approval. And it would go out e-blast to your MUD emails, and then some directors, some MUDs are also putting it as an insert into the water bill.
If it's a quarterly thing.
Well,
This was-
they're
the first one
gonna do
annual.
annual.
But-
I think quarterly is too often.
Yeah,
I think once a year makes sense. Even more often than that, maybe is needed.
I think anything we can do, I read I think anything we can do to try to continue to educate folks about what MUDs do and who MUDs are, and the value they bring. I've been in the conservation business a long time. I'm still amazed at all the work we've done. You still get 2 out of 10 people really understand what it's about or where it comes from. And I think, especially when it comes to like rates, once we recognize that there may be a need coming up in the next 2 or 3 years to get the people acquainted with that reality, why we may be raising rates, rather than the surprise, we got to do a 6% increase next month. So I
it's a good
think it'd be
idea.
good. Be
I
good.
like the idea.
I do too.
Right? Yeah. John?
Mhm. Yes.
Cool. So it's a consider and act upon, so I make a motion that we do use this as an example to build a memo or outreach notice like this. And I like the idea of having it go out in an e-blast as well as be in an insert in the bill.
Second.
We got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So we got 4 ayes. Motion carries.
Who would you like to lead that out from your side?
We can't have 3 of you, but we can have 2 of you work
Up
with.
to
Happy to do it. Does anybody want to volunteer?
It would just be to work with John to make sure that the format looks the way you want. There's a couple minor versions of this that
I like bothering John Geiger a lot, so
Okay.
Didn't bother any.
Maybe think back on what, what you remember as being accomplishments or what we can help, but.
Oh,
we
yeah.
wanna-
No,
we wanna
just
put
one
on there what's
person to do
important
that.
you.
That's all right with you.
I mean, I would use what they use as a starting point and then go, okay, well, what else? And I like the idea of a handful, 3, 4, 5, 2022 accomplishments and
Right.
3, 4, 5 focus items
Coming
for
up.
this year.
You guys have at it and
So me and Paul.
bring it back to us. And
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good.
Can't have three.
Brings us to item 13, discuss director questions from the 2021-2022 audit.
In your packet on page 55 is an email that we received from Brad. If you remember last month, he asked for an agenda item to talk about some observations he had in looking at the audit. These were the questions that he had specifically for us, and I think Maureen's ready to talk about those.
I am.
you didn't put anything in the package.
No, just your questions, but I was gonna report on it.
Okay, we'd really like to see the answers in the package.
Oh,
But-
okay.
Okay, okay, that's why I asked him. So, okay.
You wanna do that next month or? you
No,
wanna-
just go, you can verbalize it, but I mean,
Yeah, I can work
Okay.
on something, absolutely.
just go ahead and,
So for the first question, how did the 2022 spend compare to the budget? And on page 34 of your audit report, it shows you the budgeted amount of the 250,000 net loss. Actual was the $304,000 net loss, so it's about 53,000 under budget.
Okay.
Page 34, excess deficiency of revenue over or under expenses.
okay, the 53, okay,
Mhm, yep.
good, thank you.
The second question, what were the major contributors to the category on page 6? I think you're referring to in the audit report. This is a governmental wide statement, and the $1.5 million that was spent on the AMI project in 2021 was capitalized into fixed assets, so it becomes an asset and comes off of this government wide statement on page 6. But you can find that amount on page 12 of the 2021 report, which you don't have that in front of you because it pertains to the year before. It's a capital outlay expense. So it's an expense at the fund level and a capitalized to fix assets at the governmental wide statement level.
So you're saying the answer to that question 2 is it's an accounting of from expense to capital transition?
Correct. And that caused actually, instead of an increase from 2021 to 2022, it was a decrease in that position of about 639,000 government wide.
Okay,
And the third is there are no capital outlay items in this current budget year, and I printed a copy of the current budget if you'd like another one.
okay,
So
We're back in line with what previous spending was, I guess is the answer and the takeaway for that.
thank you. Okay. I don't know whether you guys found that helpful or not.
No.
Right, so we're good with item 13. Item 14, see your attorney's report. Ryan.
No general items to report today. Tracking the legislative session. To visit with y'all about that. Session's young.
Yeah.
And
Keyword.
15, there's no, we're deferring on that item. We're still working with LJA for them to provide the backup exhibit that we use. Developer developing, so we'll have that as carried forward for next month.
Excellent report. Thank you.
Yep.
One of my favorites of the night. General Manager's report, Mr. Stinson, item 16.
Yes, sir. At the trustee meeting, the audit committee / ad hoc committee on the merchant service fee topic. You remember a few months back, Paul Martin brought to the attention of the trustees that there's a lot of money being expended in merchant service fees for online payments, electronic payments, credit card payments. But it's factored into the MUD budgets, but he wanted to bring it to everyone's attention, and President Lux appointed that committee as an ad hoc committee to look into that topic and report back. Well, he reported at the trustee meeting he wants to put a pause on that because we are looking at implementing a new billing software program that would level the playing field, if you will, on merchant service fees, probably bring them down substantially, and make it be less expensive. So we're studying that, and we'll be coming back to the trustees at a future date with a recommendation on that. Mr. Martin also reported that there would be no refunds issued to the MUDs regarding any funds in the trustee or Woodlands Water Agency budget. We had a resolution passed back in 2018 where if the reserves exceeded a certain threshold, that we would rebate those back to the MUDs, and we're in that acceptable range of 1.5 to 2 months reserve. So no refunds to the MUDs this year. In your packet, there's a couple of letters from regarding Lone Star Groundwater District Position 7, the Woodlands position that is in question, I guess, in the community. Those are there for your information. We did have a personnel committee meeting with the Woodlands Water Agency Personnel Committee. We were talking about general manager special focus projects. Eric and I both sat in on that. They took our recommendations or thoughts, and they're massaging that, tweaking it, but I think it'll be shared with the trustees and other MUDs at some point. And then always nice to announce a compliment email from one of our residents regarding one of our employees. It's in your packet. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Jim. So item 17 is the trustees report, and I'd say most of that information, if not all of it's already been covered. And that meeting was actually 17 minutes shorter so far than this one. So moved on to item 18 unless you have.
Wait till the next one.
I know. Yeah, we'll see.
That'll be extended probably a little bit too.
Happy to hear any questions or input from me as the trustee or the MUD rep, the trustee board.
I was gonna ask if I could just about, and I can't remember if I read about it or saw it in an email about flushing hydrants, you know. Is that something, did I read it?
Water bill, the message on the water bill.
I just want, because I know every year that's a treat for y'all when you start flushing and you get a lot of calls from the neighborhood about wasting water onto the streets, et cetera. So it's good to have those notices, at least you're trying to reach them.
And actually, we had a recommendation that we did a few years back. We're gonna try to put out notices with our technology that we have, the Water Smart portal technology. We can focus on neighborhoods and let the neighborhood know that we'll be in that area for the next week or so. And if you have brown water, we'll bring you, what is it called? A brine out? Iron out. If your clothes get brown or get iron.
Yeah, but you remember during some of the drought times, that innovative process of having some of those trucks that run around to water that we actually put that water into those trucks to use for irrigation rather than put it on the ground. That's when we thought conservation was really important. But you remember that? Several cities.
Remember,
Well, it wasn't here, but I mean, they're trying to bleed the line, so why not put it into a big
Use it.
truck and use it to water the esplanades and stuff? So you accomplish both. I'm not suggesting we do that.
Worthy of, I like the idea.
No, I mean, it was when times get hard.
Okay.
That's it.
We good? All right, do we have any closed session?
Not
items?
today.
All right, skip 18. I need to reconvene. Does anybody have matters for placement on next month's agenda or other future agendas? None at this point?
Wanted to say, if I could, if you're done with that, speaking of John Geiger, I've mentioned before the Woodlands Green, that from once a month, we have a lecture that I try to get somebody to come and talk to us about things in general, about conservation, et cetera. But John's going to talk on the 23rd of February about the new meters. Because I've said for the last 10 or 12 years, I've been very excited about how well they can be used for conservation. Telling you that you've got a leak probably, or to check, telling you that it ran all night on your phone, let you know that you've exceeded what you used to use during the day. And I know that's been pushed by the agency, but this will be just for the general public and focused on those conservation. In addition to being real accurate, that's another plus for the meter, but he'll be doing that at 7:00 on the 23rd. woodlandsgreen.org, and John's excited to do that for me. So if you'd like to tune in.
All right, meeting's adjourned.